Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
And top of the morning to you. This is Newsline, live as usual from Dawson Street, the studios of Newsfirst, broadcasting on TV1. And our guest this morning is Sabrina Esufali, a legal expert who's here to talk to us on the right to information. And I'll let you tell me who you work for.
Thank you, Faraz. I work for Verite Research, which is an independent think tank that operates out of Colombo.
And you're head of legal there?
Yes, I am.
It's wonderful to have you on the program, Sabrina. How excited are you about the right to information?
Pretty excited. It's been about a year and a half since we've been sort of really pushing for this in this sort of cycle of governance.
Right.
And it's been sort of signed into law, and we're pretty excited to get it going.
Good. Of course, you monitor all these things in your organization. What do you think? Do you think the media should be excited about this?
I think the media should be excited about it, but I know what we've seen is that I really haven't seen the RTI make front page news.
Right.
Even on the day when it was being debated in Parliament, even on the day when the Speaker signed the certificate.
Right.
And I think that this is something that not only benefits ordinary citizens, but it has really an opportunity to up the game in terms of media engagement, both with government, with information, and I think it's a great tool that media needs to kind of warm up to.
Indeed. I don't know whether the media were skeptical about this whole matter, which is obviously it's been a long time in the making.
Since 1994, we've had versions of the RTI kind of.
Right. But perhaps there are what I call golden nuggets of skepticism and worry, and one of that is, of course, as this information is supposedly to be made available through an information officer, and the Act doesn't envisage. It may infer something or something like that, but it doesn't specifically address who should be an information officer. Is that potentially worrying?
Yes, to answer your question, I think there needs to be more detail about the kinds of expertise we expect and the Act will require from information officers. Just to kind of scale back a bit, an information officer is an officer that is stationed at every public authority, and he or she is the first port of call when a citizen brings an information or a right to information request to the relevant public authority. And the information officer will be making kind of calculations with regard to is this information disclosable under the Act? In what form should I disclose it? Shall I help the citizen making the request refine the request in a way that actually corresponds to the public authority's mandate? So it's a fairly important role that the information officer plays. Now, I don't know whether stipulating sort of the four corners of that role is within the scope of the Act, but it's absolutely critical that these kind of expectations and this kind of role is framed in the rules that the Commission devises, and this should be done sooner rather than later. But on a point of inference, until an information officer is appointed to public authorities, the Act stipulates that the chief executive officer of the public authorities should essentially function as the information officer.
That's what I was going to ask.
So that is essentially, envisaging a kind of seniority within the public authority, and I think that it would be the logical flow then to appoint people that had that kind of stature to public authorities to process information requests.
It's fair to assume that the media and the public at large are sometimes skeptical about various things that emanate from the legislative side of things, and that's why I was asking you this question. So here we have the Act saying to us that at the beginning, until such time as the Chief Executive Officer of that body should be that information officer. So it envisages somebody of some experience and responsibility and even authority, perhaps. Whereas, we us envisaging and the Act envisaging that seems to me to be at odds with this other statements that have come forth, that there will be a graduate training program. But these are young people, nothing against young people, you understand, but these young people will not have the necessary depth when they're just starting out to make decisions as to whether this is in the overriding public interest, for example, which is always a way out in this Act. Because it always says all the exclusions are subject to an overriding public interest. So how can a young person who's inexperienced and who's being trained make these decisions? How does one get over this?
I think when we talk about information officers, they don't have to be new recruits.
Right.
They can be people that are trained within public authorities.
Right.
And let's just take an example. For example, say an RTI request pertains to information that can be obtained that has to be obtained from the secretary of the particular ministry. Now, if you have someone that's new to the game, someone that really can't access the secretary, being entrusted with the responsibility to get this information out, he or she is going to find it quite difficult to comply with the 14-day period that is mandated by the Act to give a yes or no answer.
Right.
And that's just going to cause huge delays in sort of the implementation of the RTI Act.
Now these information officers, the jobs, their position is supposed to be permanent and so pensionable and so on. Ideal fodder for our politicians to appoint their people into these jobs, because every politician will admit to this. The minute they're elected, whether they've got a ministerial role or any other role, they are inundated by requests for government jobs. Everybody wants a government job, I presume, because there is some form of pension and safety and comfort. But that doesn't help the cause of us trying to get information from these people.
So I think when you talk about information officers in the context of being public officials, it's very difficult to stamp out patronage entirely.
Right.
Which is why I'm more supportive of getting people that are already in the system to be trained and equipped to be information officers.
Right.
The other thing that we can be quite hopeful about is that the information request doesn't hang sort of in the fate of the information officer.
Right.
There are various stages of appeal that a citizen can go through if you're not happy with the decision of the information officer.
Right.
So you can appeal to the designated officer. If you're not happy with the response, you can appeal to the Information Commission, which is an independently appointed body. So that's creating these safeguards that really check, I think, the effect of patronage that is sort of prevalent or is likely to be prevalent.
And from the point of view of the public, how does this help them? Will it help them if they want to know what information is held by I don't know, by what shall we say, I don't know, shall we say a bank, or let's say the financial monitoring unit of the central bank? obviously various transactions come, raise a flag. So how easy would it be for a member of the public to get the central bank, let's say the monitoring unit, to disclose what information they have on a individual?
So I think it's important when we think about the RTI to think about how the RTI is really going to change how we engage with government.
Right.
So the default position is open,
Right.
and not closed. So just because it's the Ministry of Defence,
Yeah.
or just because it's the central bank,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that these institutions are off limits
Right.
as far as the RTI is concerned, because you perceive them to have information that could either be prejudicial to the economy or national security.
Right.
But there are obviously layers in that
Right.
kind of information. So there are exemption clauses within the RTI that say when you can and cannot disclose information. So, for example, if the information that the financial unit had pertained to something that was shared in confidence,
Right.
say to the unit with regards to people's bank accounts.
Right.
So there's this exemption where information supplied by the third party in confidence cannot be supplied until the third party has been notified and the third party has a right to respond.
Right.
So that's one exemption. The second exemption is if it relates to sort of personal information
Right.
that has nothing to do with the public interest.
Right.
Or information that could essentially cause serious economic harm by premature disclosure. So now I'm stressing these adjectives because they're in fact building in thresholds to these
Right.
exemption clauses. They're creating a level of gravitas, as it were. But that's not to say that even if it falls under one of these exemptions,
Yeah.
that the public is barred from accessing it altogether.
Right.
There is this sort of magical public override clause
Yeah.
that allows you to access information that would ordinarily be not entitled to be disclosed under the exemption clauses,
Right.
if you can prove that there's an overwhelming public interest
I see.
associated with
Yeah.
the disclosure of
Yeah.
such information.
I see. I was going back to the bank here. What happens? No, back to the Ministry of Defence. What happens, Sabrina, if, for example, right now we in the media are aware that we can't get any information on the operations of the defence purchasing company, Lanka Logistics. Now, I don't want them to tell me what they've bought. I don't want to know about their shopping list, but I do want to know the financial bits of it. So, is this the sort of bill that will help me to write to the Ministry of Defence?
Absolutely.
Right.
And so really the exemption clause is framed like this. It says, so basically you can exempt or you can deny information requests
Yeah.
if it would undermine the defense of the state or its territorial integrity or national security.
Right.
Or prejudice Sri Lanka's relations with any state. So unless the information that you are requesting for is likely to have a direct consequent impact on the territorial integrity of the
Right.
state, the denial of that information is not valid.
Right.
So I think that if you were just requesting for financial information
Yes.
or information regarding
I'd like to have a
transfers
look at their
or-
audited accounts,
Yeah,
for example.
that's absolutely fine.
Right. I see. I can see some journalists rushing off to the Ministry of Defence. I see it
Not
first.
yet. You have to wait 6 months.
Oh, is it because it doesn't
Yes,
kick in?
yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, we should wait. That'd be interesting to see who is appointed at the Ministry of Defence, who the information officer will be.
Yes. I think that pay a bit more attention to who the information officer is going to be. Yeah.
Yes, it can't be some graduate trainee. Of course, in the same way, I suppose that it's, if we stick with defence, I suppose it would be a bit too much and unreasonable to ask them how many rounds of ammunition they've bought, or
Yes.
detail.
Or even like the specs of,
Yes.
of particular weapons that they've purchased.
Right.
The details of, who they've purchased it from. And
I see.
I think that would
Be a bit much.
be a bit much, yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So, what are the other exclusions that we are going to be faced with?
So something that has been really in the media a lot is this idea that overseas or information pertaining to overseas trade agreements
Right.
are off bounds.
Yes.
But that's not quite correct.
No.
Because the framing of the denial clause is such
Right.
that, once again, I will stress adjectives because adjectives are key here.
Yeah.
That it says that information that would cause serious prejudice to the economy of Sri Lanka by disclosing prematurely decisions
Right.
that deal or that relate to overseas trade agreements
Right.
will be off bounds. So that's not to say that everything associated with a trade agreement is off limits.
Right.
It's only the information that could essentially seriously prejudice the economy of Sri Lanka by its premature disclosure that essentially would be off limits. But once again, you have this public interest override clause
Right.
in the event that there's overwhelming public interest to really
would
overcome
be.
this hurdle.
Right. I see. But now, for example, I was reading reports that under India's Right to Information Act, some people have been trying to find out detail of the Sampur coal power project. The Indian authorities have turned that down using that same bill.
Yeah.
We would like to know what the real cost and all that. We'd like to have more details because there's a lot of public concern about another coal power station and so on. We have environmentalists saying that LNG is the way forward. We have the chairman of the CB, for example, says that, well, that's fine, but at the moment, coal's doing very well, thank you, and it is making an impact to the bottom line of their finances. So, what do you think it might be secret and not so much in the national interest?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure on what basis the Indian RTI Commission turned this down. I'm not actually aware of that. But what I can say is that on the face of it, it doesn't sound like something that the RTI Act would not allow you to access.
Right.
And sort of another aspect of it is that under the RTI Act, every ministry that engages in this idea of engages in a big project, and a project is defined to be anything that is over $100,000 for foreign funded projects and over 500,000 rupees for locally funded projects. They have to disclose information regarding the project 3 months before the project actually initiates.
Oh, I see.
So they have to not only disclose it to the public, but they have to specifically disclose it to interested parties. And that would be people that were on the area and so on. And so that gives the public both a right to know, but it gives the public a right to know at the right time. So you can actually object to it, you can strengthen it. Environmentalists will find this a really useful resource as well.
It's not a question of closing the door after the horse is bolted.
Exactly.
Right. A viewer is saying this to us. Who interprets whether it is deniable information or not?
So at the first port of call, as I said, the information officer would make that calculation.
Right.
If the citizen is not happy, actually let me talk you through the process because I think that will be quite helpful.
Indeed.
So you go to the public authority. There are over 4,000 public authorities that have that come under the RTI Act, and the information officer is the person that you want to lodge your RTI request with. You can lodge it in any language you like. You don't have to give a reason for why you are requesting such information.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if you're asked, you don't actually have to give a reason for why you're giving this information. If for some reason you can't commit your request to writing, the information officer is bound to help you formulate it. Then the information officer has 14 days in which to process it.
Right.
So a yes or no answer. Once, say for example, he denies your request,
Yeah.
you can apply to the designated officer, who's also an officer that's stationed at the public authority.
Right.
If you're still not happy with the outcome of that decision, you can appeal to the Information Commission. And if you're still not happy, you have a right of appeal at the Court of Appeal.
I see. And then finally, can you go to the Supreme Court?
You can file a fundamental rights application because the 19th Amendment brought the right to information under the fundamental rights chapter.
See.
Yeah.
I see. So there are some good. The path is clear. But can they deny it to me on the basis that I'm a journalist and I'm obviously going to publish this or broadcast it?
So the original version of the bill actually could get you in a bit of trouble because the original version of the bill that we saw in February 2015 actually had a publication ban
Right.
on information that you obtained via the RTI Act. But this has been obviously whittled down and it's been taken out of the final act as we see it. Yes.
I see. So again, it's looking good. But what about if I wanted to find out the terms of let's say a contract entered into by the CB and coal is a good point. We'd like to know all the spec about the coal because we can work out why there's so much of ash floating around immediately around the power plant in Noracholi, for example. Where would that lead to?
So I think that it's important when we talk about the right to information to understand the kinds of information that we're talking about.
Right.
We're not just talking about data points.
Yeah.
We're also talking about contracts.
Right.
We're also talking about circulars. We're talking about emails.
Right.
We're talking about samples. So even if you have like a soil sample from around the area that you have in the public authority, you have a right to request for that.
I see.
So I think it's critical that we really understand the scope of the Act, and I think the media has a big role to play in kind of equipping people with understanding really what the right encompasses here.
And I suppose, what would the position be, Sabrina, when it comes to, for example, there's so much of controversy about the purchase of coal to come into Sri Lanka. And if we, the public, want to know what this is all about, even if it's not for publishing, merely for information, to satiate a inquisitive mind, and we want to know what this controversy is about. Why is this controversy? Can we ask, and will they comply when we ask and say, can you give us the details of all the bids you've got? And we already know you've given the contract to XYZ, but we really want to know the details of the whole thing. Do you think that it will be entertained?
So in the bidding process, I think that to ask for a bid before the bid has closed would essentially come under this exemption of harming the competitive position of a third party.
Right.
But once the bid has been awarded, I don't see a reason as to why it should be secret.
Because it's historic.
It's in the public interest. But I think for us, you raised a really important point about kind of fueling an inquisitive mind. And I think that in Sri Lanka, we have a lot of information that is out there. But I think really it's critical to think about what we do with that information.
Right.
So it's about translating the information that is out there into knowledge.
Right.
Into kind of bite-sized, comprehensible chunks that people can make sense of.
Indeed.
So you also not only can exercise your right to information, but you can also exercise your right to knowledge.
Yes.
And I think that's where really the role of civil society, that's where the role of media kicks in, to really translate the information that we get into public understanding. And that's really going to be the thing that unlocks citizen engagement, because it's not just, fact patterns and data points that are going to change the game here.
Occasionally, we try to infuse a bit of lightness into this program, even though this is a very important subject. So I'm going to ask you something which you may want to give us your considered opinion on.
Okay.
This is coming from a viewer. Do you think Ranil Wickremesinghe has enough of lawyer friends and royalists to be appointed to these positions?
I'm not going to comment. Is that allowed?
Well,
at least you got a laugh. So
we did. So basically, this is very good news, because provided it works, of course.
Yes.
Because the public finally can make really considered opinions on various matters. I wonder, Sabrina, if the information that I may seek from the central bank's records office now, because it's in the past, as to what happened during the contentious period from February 2015 till now, bond issue. If I was to ask and seek this information, for example, I'd love to see and hear what the central bank officials said at COPE. It would then answer all my queries. Do you think that there is a case for the chief executive of the bank, I suppose the governor, to turn around and say, well, actually no, because it is sensitive information?
Sensitive information doesn't quite cut it.
Right,
So it's also that if he could argue that by some means the premature, it would affect kind of economic interest in a premature sense, which I found quite difficult to construct. Maybe, but I think your case is stronger, and I think that your public interest kind of outweighs that.
Right. And I suppose this is all encompassing. So even the Auditor General, we the public can try to get information. And so you say that this will take 6 months to...
Yes, so the Act gives public authorities a period of 6 months in which to be RTI compliant, to get their house in order, as it were.
So basically, I suppose at the beginning, the chief executives of these various organizations will be the first lot of information officers.
Yes, and I think in the 6 months, it's not that the right to information just stays dormant.
Right.
There are appointments that need to be made, rules that need to be made.
Who appoints members of the commission then?
The Constitutional Council.
Yeah.
So it's an independently appointed commission.
Right. So there are some reasonable checks and balances going.
Yes.
It's only this doosra of who will be the information officers after the initial period.
But that's definitely, even if you're not satisfied with the result, that's obviously going to cause delays, I think, in processing RTI requests. But it definitely doesn't sort of defeat the purpose of the RTI in any sense of the word.
Sabrina Esufali, it's been an absolute wonderful pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you,
and you've been extremely well informed, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with all of us and our viewers. We do appreciate your presence.
Thank you so much.
Do come back on our day.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. This is Newsline. It's been a pleasure having you, and just to remind you, we're here Monday through Friday, 7 till 7:30, broadcasting live from Dawson Street in Clambo. Take care. Have a great day ahead of you. God bless.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukut Ali.